G'day guys, welcome to another episode of COVID Convos, where we have real conversations with real people about what wellbeing looks like in a pandemic. My name's Justin Griggs, or Griggsy, and looking forward to having a chat today with our team. Simon, all well, mate?
I'm all good, Griggsy. How are you going? You're looking a bit better than last time I saw you, fortunately.
Yeah, feeling okay, mate. Thanks for asking. Kesh, all well?
Yeah, man, doing all right. Keeping it simple, keeping it easy, very happy, very healthy. Can't complain.
I am aware that these guys are getting up. That's 2 mornings in a row now that they've gotten up at the crack of dawn. So well done, guys. Looking pretty good as a result of that effort. So thanks a lot for making the time. And thank you very much to our special guest today, Paula Newell. How are you, Paula?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
No worries. We're thrilled to chat to you, and we'd love to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself to our listeners, and obviously to the team as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Paula Newell. I am a principal for 7th through 12th grade at an international school in Mexico. We've traveled quite a bit. I've been in international education for a little while. Spent a long time in Indonesia, but I'm originally from the United States. I'm a mom of 4 and married for many, many, many years. And yeah, that's it. That's a little bit about me.
Wow, Paula, that's four children and moving around to international schools. That's an interesting, I guess, experience that you've got there. Did you want to talk a little bit about how you and your family have seen the COVID situation so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So my oldest 3 children are adults now. I have one is married and has 2 boys of his own, and then I have a daughter in Miami who graduated college last year, and I have a daughter in Texas who is in her junior year of college, and then my 17-year-old is with us here in Mexico. So it's affected us in a variety of different ways. Most importantly, just connecting as a family, like what are our next steps? What should we be doing? And as a mom, of course, making sure everyone's okay where they're at. I think the biggest impact has been on my college-age daughter, because obviously mom and dad are in Mexico, and she, lost her housing and lost her meal plan, and it was the toughest transition from her when her college shut down. So it's been interesting to navigate what that looks like, and continuing just to encourage her, because she didn't sign up for online college, right? She enjoys the actual experience. She enjoys the academic discussions, and she's a little bit in mourning, I would say, a little bit of grieving in the loss of school. But it's been interesting to navigate it in all the different pieces personally, and then connect those as well to your profession. It's been an interesting navigation that we've had to go through. Nothing prepares you for this type of thing. You have to just do the best you can and figure it out as you go.
Yeah, I think that's the name of the game at the moment, Paula, just working it out as you go, and everybody's in the same boat.
Right.
I'm just interested, what part of Mexico are you in, and what's it been like playing out on the ground there? Are there similar restrictions to what we might have here in Australia or the US?
So I am living in Durango, Mexico. It's about 3.5 hours from the west coast of Mexico. We are in a mountainous, a more rural area. We're not in like the big Mexico City or Monterrey or any of the larger cities. The people in our town, you'll see maybe 15% wearing masks, and a lot of people are talking about staying at home, especially those connected with the school. And I think a lot of that has to do with the information and education we've sent out administratively to families to inform them of what's going on. But the rest of the city is just living life pretty much as normal. Now, the big cities are very, very different. The big cities have shut down completely. There's been a lot of, each state in Mexico has kind of done their own thing. So some of them have curfews and stay-at-home orders. Some of them refuse to believe that it will impact them, and they're encouraging their citizens to move forward as normal and not let it get them down. So it's kind of a mixed bag here.
I assume there's been some restrictions on travel between the US?
Yeah, so that's been something that we've had to really think through. So the flights themselves are limited. There are still flights going back and forth, but a couple of, especially American carriers, have just stopped serving specific Mexican cities, ones that have a higher rate of infection. We are actually, because my daughter's in Texas, we're about 12 hours for a drive, so we could technically drive. The borders are open for U.S. citizens to return home, of course. They're doing testing at the border from what they've told us, and the embassy's done a great job about keeping us informed of changes, so that's been one good thing. If you sign up for their traveler program, they've done a really good job about informing us. But non-essential travel, they're saying they've stopped all non-essential travel. I don't technically know what that looks like or means, but that's what they're telling us right now. For us as a family, the problem that we're having is some of the northern states in Mexico, there's a little bit of fear that's starting to increase because of the numbers you're seeing in the United States for infection. So some of the northern Mexican states have decided to close their borders to all travel, which means if we did decide to drive home, we face a good possibility that we could get to the southern tip of some of those states and either be questioned or not be allowed to pass through. It's a little up in the air at the moment.
Paula, I'm interested with, like, obviously you've spent a bit of time out of the country throughout your life, and you clearly consider or have considered going back due to the family that you've got in the States. Is there that draw card, you know, when you first got the news about, you know, sort of come home or borders closing, that sort of thing, and the escalation that's we're going through or we've gone through, was there that pull to go home and sort of say, well, we want to be in the US? Like, I guess what I'm really asking is, do you still feel like the US is ultimately home for you?
Home is hard. The definition of home, I think, has gotten more and more difficult. We used to say home, of course, is where we live together, regardless of that location. But now home looks a little different because we have our kids that are adults spread out all over the place. So it's just a little more tricky. We have felt a pull to go back to the United States, but it was kind of an odd thing that as it started to become more and more apparent that might be necessary, professionally, we switched over to distance learning at the school. So there was work that I had to do on the ground here. Well, as I was trying to complete that, and we were also looking at going home, the numbers in the United States started to really increase pretty rapidly. So then it became one of those, why would we go back where the numbers seem so much higher there than they are here? So we've kind of been doing this waiting game a bit, which is a little touchy, a little tricky. You know, as the United States seems to have it under control and the numbers maybe start to stabilize, Mexico's probably 3 weeks to a month out from where the United States was. So we definitely think that there's going to be this plateau or decline in the US and then a rapid rise in Mexico. So then trying to time that becomes a little tricky. I'm not sure if we'll get it perfect, but we definitely do think, especially as schools start to say we're out for the year, our intention was to go home to the US for the summer just to see our children anyway. So the timing of that's still a bit up in the air.
One thing I'm also interested in is with, I guess, how the effect that this has had on your school and on your role as a principal, because I'm sure it's obviously, from a personal perspective, it's obviously quite stressful. But from a professional perspective also, I guess it's a number of things. One that I'm considering is, I guess, staff because we have heard that in international schools, certain staff may go home to other countries, and then the issue may be that there may be an issue them coming back later down the track. Is that something that the schools thought about or having to deal with? as we speak, or not,
Yeah.
not on the radar at the moment?
Well, we've been trying to communicate maybe even over communicate pretty often with our foreign staff. We have told them as an administrative team that they have to make a personal decision. We understand that they can do distance learning from anywhere, and if they feel like their responsibility is to return home, then we're going to support that decision. The other side of that, though, as a business, is what if they do return home and then they're unable to enter back into the country? What does that look like? As well, we were already in full swing for recruiting season. So we've already hired people and have tentative contracts with them to start in August. We want to continue to communicate with them. Our plan is to move forward as if that's still the plan, but we obviously know that everything's a little up in the air right now. So I think administratively, the best that we can do is remember that our staff are people first with families. So we have to support them as, daughters and sons to take care of moms and dads, or as parents taking care of their children, whatever that looks like. That has to come first, and then we'll work as a team to pick up whatever slack that may create. That's kind of been my guiding principle. I just want them to know, I don't want them to have an issue at home and they feel they need to go home to take care of family or whatever they need to do and feel as if their job is at risk. That's not a healthy place to be. So, and that's not the kind of employment situation we want for them either. That's an added stress they don't need.
Paula, I'm interested in how the local Mexican culture, I suppose, or how it's been impacted by this virus. Over here in Australia, well, it's getting closer to winter, so we're not outdoors as much, but I think we've got the reputation for being out at the beach and having barbecues and socialising with people. So it's been a big change to our daily life and culture. The restrictions have been in place. Has there, and there's been some resistance to that by some parts of the community. But yeah, how's it been in Mexico? Are people, I've spent a little bit of time there a while ago, but I assume like everywhere else, people like to get out and about, and now they can't do that as much. And how are people coping with that?
Well, the culture here is very communal, right? Family and connections are very, very important. So to consider being isolated is a very foreign concept. In just the way they even eat dinner on a nightly basis, it's usually in groups, and outdoors is a big deal because the weather allows it most of the year round. We had the opportunity to come to the coast to spend a lot of our quarantine time here, and typically this would be Semana Santa, which is the Easter break and the spring break for the students. It's 2 weeks of break, and everyone holidays at that time. We're here in Mazatlan at the beach, and the beaches are closed and completely empty. It's a very, very odd experience to be along the beach and it just be absolutely empty and deserted. Most of the restaurants, all the hotels, everything is closed down here. So it's very much like a ghost town, which is an odd feel. But I think that Sinaloa, which is where the state that Mazatlan's in, the northern portion of the state has had an increase in positive tests for COVID-19. So they kind of just clamped down. They even recently, much to my husband's dismay, stopped selling all alcohol here in Mazatlan. But part of the issue was the concern for domestic abuse because of the quarantine and the length of the quarantine. There's so many, fingers that kind of are interwoven in this type of situation that the governor here just decided to stop all alcohol sales in order to at least help in some way, possibly prevent some of those issues. Yeah.
Paula, is this bringing up any questions for you at all? Anything that's, I guess what I'm asking, is there anything that's come up that that you haven't previously thought about? Or maybe another way of phrasing that, has it changed your mind on anything, this whole situation in the last month or two?
I think that there's, as an educator, I've always really had the philosophy of a very student-centered philosophy for education. But I think this has taken it to a new level. I've really thought through, you know, a lot of people say that. That's a very common buzzword in education, is student-centered. You know, education has their phrases and slang and all that kind of stuff. But you really have to put a definition behind it, a concrete definition behind it when it's tested, like any theory. And this has become a very important aspect for me at this point, especially as a principal, to make sure that whatever decisions that we make, we're making them where the student is the first consideration of that decision. You know, there's an equity within every school of access to technology, and, you know, even just to have stable internet in our area. And that's putting pressure on students that they didn't necessarily buy into, right? This isn't their fault. They were just put in this circumstance, and the honest to goodness truth is we haven't prepared them for this. We didn't know to prepare them for this, but now we have to be very, very intentional about, you know, if we have an assignment and it's due on Thursday, are we really going to penalize students at this point who are unable to get it turned in? And what does distance learning mean when students are isolated the way that they have been? So, you know, before I was a principal, I was a school counselor for many years. So I feel like I've kind of stepped back into that role a little bit to try and just have conversations with students. We use Google for education. So Google Meets, I have open time for students to pop in and chat with me, and just to make sure that we're meeting their needs. And sometimes their needs have nothing to do with academics, and we have to be okay with that.
Paula, just talking about the students there, I'm wondering, and especially with your background being a counsellor, just if you, how are the students going? Basically, I assume similarities to other places in the world, but also being an international school, the students are, you know, away from their home country to start with. So there's some challenges with that, and now on top of that, they've got the remote and flexible learning approach. And yeah, how are they coping?
You know, I think we've got really three main generic subsections of students. Some kids who maybe even weren't doing quite as well as we knew they could in person are thriving online. They love this. They love the independence. They love that they can go to school in their pajamas and they can do it anytime they want. They really have started to thrive in this environment. So that's teaching us something about when we do return to school, how are we going to meet those needs? That's a conversation that's shelved right now, but needs to be had, because we're seeing particularly a couple of students who are have taken off. You would have never thought, but have just taken off. You have another group of students, though, who really need additional supports right now. And I think part of the conversation for them is allowing them to ask the questions, allowing them access. They need to be able to say, I'm not doing well, and someone to say, it's okay, let's figure out a plan together, and not be so rigid in the way we're doing things. We've got to really let go. And for some of my teachers, that's been a very easy thing to do. But, you know, for some of my more traditional teachers, it's been a harder learning curve for them. Being able to let go of, but they didn't get it in time, I have to penalize them, and saying, no, we're not going to penalize them. But that's not fair to the other students. And those conversations, they're really, really good conversations, but they're stretching depending on how you were trained as a teacher. But then we have a third group, and that's the group that I'm worried most about, and those are the kids who are just missing. They're not logging in, they're not connecting. Some of that is because of technical issues, but I do fear that we have a huge section of kids who are struggling. Their home lives aren't very stable, or their parents are working, and so now they've become the caretaker to younger siblings. You know, now they've taken on additional roles than what they would have. Our counseling staff is available every day. The teachers, if they don't hear from a student, they're trying to reach out. If they can't get them, our counselors are stepping in to make those phone calls. We're trying to talk to parents. Communication looks different now. We're communicating a lot more now, especially with parents, than we were before. But I think it's just become vital to let students know, one, they're missed and they're cared for. you know, we miss you, where you at? We miss seeing your face. We miss talking to you. But two, just to make sure that they know that they do have support, that we get that this is not easy, and it's okay to be a little scared. It's okay to be a little frustrated. For a lot of the senior class, it's okay to be a little angry. You know, this is not what you anticipated for it to be. And just allowing them and showing them that their emotions have value, and that they're as a person are more important than that math worksheet that was assigned.
I wonder whether, in a way, being already out of the ordinary and being in another country, learning and living, whether your students might be sort of already in a better place to deal with some of this uncertainty and change, because maybe they're used to it and they've built up a bit of a resilience compared to, for example, my kids always lived in the same place, lived in the same house. This may be more of a significant change. Yeah, not sure.
Yeah, it could be. I think for some kids, though, that change in their environment is normal, but change in their schedule is tough. So even though they're used to maybe being in different cities and different locations, there's something that's normal everywhere they go, and that's their school schedule, or that's the requirements placed on them academically. So I think for some of our students who are newer to this area, the change in environment and also then taking away kind of that support of that schedule for them gets to be a little tough. Usually kids who travel a lot, I can see that in my own kids, they're a little more resilient. But I also think that sometimes they're just a little more cynical too, because they've seen kind of, you know, you have no idea what that's like in Indonesia. That's, you know, you have nothing to cry about here, right? You know, it's just a little different. So, but I think that each kid too, like I said, I have 4 kids and every one of them are so very different in how they approach things, regardless of the fact of the travels that they had growing up.
Yeah, Paula, I think it's so important to remember that thinking about some of the kids that I teach back in Australia, for a lot of them, you've taken the most or the best parts of school and you've chucked them away and you've left them with what they actually hated,
Right.
which was the content, you know. So they loved doing the sport. They loved having the social connection. They loved playing at recess with their mates, and all of that's gone. And they're left with the raw content and all the other things they probably feel like that they used to like leaving home as well. That's all gone. So I think it's, you know, I see a lot of positivity about how systems are being updated on by schools, and they're implementing these models, and it's great. But that doesn't necessarily guarantee that students are going to be like, you know, having a fantastic learning experience, because for a lot of them, you know, they put up with the content to get to those other things. So it's hard to remember that, because that's what I was like as a kid, but it's obviously not what I think like as a teacher.
That being said, I haven't said anything this whole conversation. I need to get in there. Not because I haven't been interested, Paul. I have so many questions for you. It's just Simon and Griggsy always beat me to the punch. But I would be loath to not mention this, given what you just talked about, Griggsy. There's this application platform called Classcraft, which I've become really, really interested in. And I think, you know, teachers should experiment with it, man. It kind of turns gaming into an RPG game. It turns your curriculum into an RPG game.
Classcraft is cool.
Yeah. So all the teachers that are listening, check it out. Just, you know, you've got the time, you're already playing with some stuff. It could give your kids that little bit of thing that they don't have right now.
Right. The flip side of that, though, I will tell you the flip side of that, some of the conversations we've had, it has been awesome to see all of these companies come out and give away resources for free. It has been a really, I mean, that just talks to you about the human spirit, right? But at the same time, we have to be very careful not to overwhelm our kids with all of these things. So we've had a lot of conversations about, okay, how are we going to narrow the field? And so, you know, we don't have this teacher signing onto this platform and this one. And to be quite honest, our parents have no idea what they're doing and all these logins. So we've really tried to have that conversation about, okay, here's all these cool resources we can use. How are we going to narrow that to make sure that our kids are not completely and totally overwhelmed by it? It's an interesting conversation to have. You know, technology is kind of my background. I taught middle school computer for a long time, and middle schoolers love that stuff, right? It's the most awesome thing in the world for them. So, but at the same time, you watch them start doing that and then they don't do anything else, right? So how do you balance all of those resources? But you're right, Classcraft is a really cool resource.
I'll definitely give it a look. Thanks for the tip, Kesh. I'll give it a look in 3 months when I actually go back to work. But Paula, I'm just aware of time, and was just wondering if you had anything that you wanted to touch on that we hadn't already asked you about throughout this conversation.
Well, I think, for me, and I've thought quite a lot about what is my role, right? It's kind of hard being a principal online because your role is really to be in the hallways and to be in the classrooms. And then when all of that locational stuff is taken away from you, then what does that look like? But I think for me, just communicating, if there were a message that I want to get out there, is those gaps in skills, those gaps in standards and content, we can always address that. We can catch them up in September. We can slow down the content next year and make sure that we fill in all those gaps. We just need to make sure the kids are healthy and able to move forward. And I think that all these conversations about curriculum and resources and these platforms that everyone's using, it's really great stuff. I love that it's pushing some people who are resistant to technology in with a little bit, but at the same time, the kids are resilient. They really are, and they will adapt. And next year we'll have plenty of time to get in all of the stuff that we missed. For now, let's just make sure they're okay.
Well said.
Well said, Paula. And on behalf of my team and myself, obviously, thank you so much for coming in and joining us today. It's really been a pleasure to speak to you.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
And I got to say, I'm sure that your team is very thankful for the way that you go about it. And for those out there who don't know Paula and maybe would like to connect, she puts out some amazing inspirational content on LinkedIn. So I'm sure you can find her on there. And that's about all we have time for, unfortunately, today. We'd love to speak to you for longer, Paula, but thanks for joining us again, and thanks to all our viewers and our listeners for joining us. As always, we request that you like, share, subscribe, and we ask that you also all stay healthy, everyone. See you later.